The grinding of metal against metal shot through Jack Sullivan's ears as his '92 Ford F-150 skidded toward the edge of the Montana mountain pass. His left hand clamped the wheel while his right downshifted with practiced precision, the truck's tires fighting for traction on the ice-slicked road. 20 feet below, jagged rocks waited. "Not today," Jack muttered, muscle memory from convoy training kicking in. He countersteered into the skid, the truck's rear end swinging back in line just as the guardrail loomed inches from his driver's side door. The truck shuddered to a stop, half on the shoulder, half on the road. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear, but from the familiar surge of adrenaline he hadn't felt since his last firefight outside Fallujah. He flexed his left hand, phantom pain shooting through the scar tissue where shrapnel had torn through muscle and tendon 12 years ago. He reached into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing the worn photograph of Marie. Her smile, captured 2 months before the cancer diagnosis, still reached her eyes. "Almost there," he told her. "Almost found that quiet place you wanted for me." 3 days on the road from Arizona, his entire life packed in the truck bed. At 48, the former Marine Staff Sergeant had sold everything. The auto repair shop he'd built from nothing, the small house they'd shared, all of it, to buy a 160 acres of Montana wilderness, a place to escape the memories, the nightmares, the crushing weight of surviving when so many hadn't. As Jack crested the final ridge, the valley opened before him, sprawling pastures, pine forests, a creek cutting through the eastern boundary, and nestled in the center, a 2-story farmhouse with several outbuildings. His new beginning. But something was wrong. Smoke curled from the chimney. Lights glowed in windows that should have been dark. Franklin Reed, the seller, had promised vacant possession. "Not a soul for miles," he'd said. "Perfect isolation." Jack's jaw tightened as he navigated down the gravel drive. 3 figures stood on the farmhouse porch, watching his approach with the stillness of sentinels. Women, 3 of them. He cut the engine, the sudden silence broken only by the ticking of the cooling motor. His hand moved instinctively beneath the seat, fingers finding the cold metal of his father's Colt 1911. He left it there, for now. The tallest woman stepped forward as Jack exited the truck. She wore canvas work pants and a flannel shirt rolled to expose forearms corded with muscle, silver streaked through her brown hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail. "You must be Jack Sullivan," she said, her voice carrying natural authority. "I'm Rebecca Morgan. These are my partners, Sarah Blackwood and Laura Chen." Sarah Blackwood stood to her right, Native American features set in a guarded expression, her dark eyes assessing him with the practiced precision of someone who'd learned to read threats early. Laura Chen, smaller than the others, but with sharp intelligence in her gaze, watched him from Rebecca's left. Jack positioned himself with his back to the truck, sightlines clear. "I am, and you're trespassing on private property." Rebecca's expression didn't change. "That's where you're wrong, Mr. Sullivan. We have every right to be here." Jack felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the first warning sign of the anger he'd fought to control since coming home with pieces of his unit left behind in the sand. "I have the deed right here," he said, patting his jacket pocket. "Whatever arrangement you had with Reed ended when he sold the property." "That's not entirely accurate," Rebecca replied, nodding to Laura, who produced a folder from behind her. "Franklin Reed sold you the property, yes, but the land comes with certain obligations that transfer to any new owner." Jack didn't move to take the offered folder. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I've had a long drive, and I'm not in the mood for scams." A flash of anger crossed Rebecca's face, quick, then controlled. Interesting. She wasn't intimidated. "It's 30 degrees and dropping," Sarah Blackwood spoke for the first time, her voice carrying unexpected gentleness. Maybe we should discuss this inside like civilized people. There's coffee and documentation you'll want to see. Jack weighed his options. 3 women, seemingly unarmed, but the mention of documentation raised questions he needed answers to, and the temperature was indeed plummeting with the sun. Fine, he conceded, but this better be quick. The interior of the farmhouse was warmer than Jack expected, both in temperature and appearance. A wood stove crackled in the corner of a spacious living room. The walls were painted a warm yellow, adorned with landscape paintings and photographs. Jack remained standing, back to the wall, as the women took seats. He noted the exits, the windows, the layout, an automatic assessment from years of training. 3 years ago, Rebecca began, opening the folder on the coffee table. Franklin Reed purchased this property with the intention of establishing a sustainable cattle ranch. He had money but no practical knowledge of ranching. He formed a partnership with the 3 of us. She slid a document toward Jack. He reluctantly picked it up. "I'm an agricultural engineer," she continued. "Sarah is a veterinarian specializing in livestock, and Laura has an MBA with a focus on rural business development. We each invested not just expertise, but our savings. We improved the land, established breeding stock, created a viable business." Jack's eyes caught on a paragraph halfway down the page, heavily underlined. "All obligations and agreements herein shall transfer to any subsequent owner of the property." "This can't be legally binding," he said, voice hardening. Laura, who had returned with coffee, fixed him with a direct stare. "It is. The partnership agreement includes a covenant that runs with the land. Franklin made sure of that before he disappeared with your money." Jack's head snapped up. "What?" A flash of memory, Iraq, 2004, approaching a building that didn't feel right, the same instinct now screaming that he'd walked into an ambush. Sarah leaned forward. "Franklin Reed never intended to be a rancher. Once we made this place viable, he listed it for sale without telling us. He collected your payment and vanished." "Leaving us with what?" Rebecca finished, meeting his gaze directly. "A mountain of debt in the partnership's name. Equipment leases, feed suppliers, veterinary services, all overdue, and a bank loan coming due in 45 days. "That's not my problem," Jack said automatically. "It is if you want clear title to this land," Laura replied. "The debts are attached to the property. And there's something else." She produced a letter with corporate letterhead. "Montana Western Mining has been trying to buy this land for 2 years. There's a copper deposit under the northeast section. Once the debts are called in and we default, they'll swoop in and buy it at auction for pennies on the dollar." Jack set down his untouched coffee and moved to the window. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the mountains mere shadows against the star-filled sky. "Show me these debts," he said finally. For the next hour, Jack examined loan documents, invoices, and bank statements. The story checked out: $260,000 in debt, due in 45 days. "I need to make some calls," he said abruptly. Alone in the small office, Jack called his bank, the county recorder's office, and finally the real estate attorney who had handled the transaction. Each call confirmed what he feared. The women's claims appeared legitimate. When he returned to the living room, his expression was hard. "Your story checks out, but I still don't see how this is my responsibility. I could walk away. Let the bank take it." "You could," Rebecca acknowledged, "but you'd lose everything you invested. And from the way you look at this land, I don't think that's what you want." Jack said nothing, unsettled by how accurately she had read him. "There's another option," Sarah suggested quietly. "Work with us. We know this land, this operation. With your investment and our expertise, we could make this work." "I came here for solitude," Jack challenged. "Not business partners I never asked for." "What did you plan to do with 160 acres?" Sarah asked. "Just sit and look at it?" Before Jack could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Rebecca moved to the window, her body tensing. Montana Western, she said grimly. Right on schedule. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up beside Jack's truck. A tall man in an expensive overcoat emerged, surveying the property with proprietary arrogance. Harold Winters, Rebecca explained. They're head of acquisition. Jack felt a surprising surge of protectiveness. Let me handle this. He stepped outside, the cold air a shock after the warmth of the house. Winters turned, offering a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. You must be the new owner, he said, extending his hand. Harold Winters, Montana Western Mining. Jack ignored the hand. Jack Sullivan, private property, not interested in visitors. Winter's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. I understand you've just arrived, Mr. Sullivan. Perhaps you're not aware of the situation here. I'm aware, Jack replied flatly. Then you know this property has significant financial encumbrances. Winters continued smoothly. My company is prepared to make you a generous offer, significantly more than you paid, and save you the headache. Jack had encountered men like Winters before, in boardrooms and battlefields. Different uniforms, same predatory instinct. Not interested, he repeated. Winters produced a business card. My offer stands for 1 week. Some fights aren't worth having, Mr. Sullivan, especially for a man who's already fought enough. His eyes flickered deliberately to Jack's scarred left hand. The comment hit like a physical blow. How did Winters know about his military service? Jack maintained his neutral expression, but inwardly alarm bells rang. This was no coincidental visit. After Winters departed, Jack returned to find the 3 women waiting expectantly. What did he offer? Laura asked. Doesn't matter, Jack replied. I don't like being pressured. A ghost of a smile crossed Rebecca's face. That makes 2 of us. Jack sat heavily at the kitchen table. He had come seeking simplicity and found himself in the middle of a complex situation with no easy exit. But one thing had become clear during Winter's visit. He didn't want this land falling into Montana Western's hands. If, he said carefully, and that's a big if I were to consider working with you, it would be on my terms. New agreement, clear boundaries, defined responsibilities. For the next hour, they sketched the framework of a potential partnership. Jack would contribute his remaining capital, about $70,000, and labor. The women would continue managing their areas of expertise. It wasn't what he had planned, but as he stepped onto the porch that night to watch the stars, Jack felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of purpose. The crack of gunfire jolted Jack from sleep. For a heartbeat, he was back in Iraq, scrambling for his weapon as mortar shells rained down. Then reality reasserted itself. Montana, the farmhouse. The partnership he'd reluctantly agreed to 2 weeks ago. Another shot echoed across the property. Jack grabbed his Colt and moved silently to the hallway, where he nearly collided with Rebecca, shotgun already in hand. East pasture, she said tersely. Motion sensors just went off. They found the fence cut in 3 places, cattle scattering toward the road. As they worked to round up the animals, Jack caught movement in the tree line. 2 figures retreating into the darkness. Cover me, he told Rebecca, then sprinted toward the trees, combat training taking over. He caught the slower figure at the forest edge, tackling him to the ground. The man swung wildly, but Jack subdued him with practiced efficiency, knee in the back, arm twisted up. Who sent you? Jack demanded. Nobody. Let me go. Man. The fear in the young man's voice was genuine. Jack spun him around, keeping him pinned. The kid couldn't be more than 20. Winters paid you, didn't he? Something flickered in the kid's eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Winters just said to deliver a message. Said to tell you that accidents happen all the time on remote properties. Help comes real slow out here. Jack's jaw tightened. Tell Winters if he sends anyone else onto my property, they won't be walking back off. He released the kid, who scrambled away into the darkness. By morning, they had repaired the fence and accounted for all animals, but the message was clear. Things were escalating. 2 weeks later, Jack woke drenched in sweat, the dream still vivid. The IED blast, Ramirez screaming for help, the copper taste of blood and sand. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. The worn photograph of Marie sat on his nightstand, next to his father's watch and the dog tags of the men who hadn't made it home. He picked up Marie's picture, tracing her smile with his thumb. Not exactly the quiet place we talked about, he whispered. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Sarah stood in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. Heard you moving around, she said. Thought you could use this. Jack accepted with a nod of thanks, quickly tucking Marie's photo away. Over the past month, he had developed an unexpected rapport with Sarah. Her quiet confidence reminded him of the best NCOs he'd served with. Any progress on the loan? He asked. Laura's still working on it, but we're running out of time. She hesitated. The sheriff stopped by while you were fixing the tractor. Said Winters was in the wagon wheel last night, talking about a fire inspection that would shut us down. Jack nodded grimly. We need to change tactics. We've been reacting to Winters' moves. Time to make him react to ours. The wagon wheel was the only bar within 20 miles, a low-slung building with neon beer signs and pickups parked outside. Jack pushed through the door, instantly cataloging the room. Locals at the bar, a few ranchers playing pool, and in the back corner, Harold Winters holding court with 2 men in suits. Jack ordered a beer and took it to a table with a clear view of Winters. The conversation at the bar stalled briefly as the locals eyed him, then resumed. Sullivan, right? A heavy-set man in his 60s slid into the chair across from him. Jim Holden. Run the property next to Old Man Turner's place. Jack nodded. Jack Sullivan. Heard you bought the Reed place. Also heard you kept those 3 women on. Holden studied him. Bold move. They know the operation, Jack said simply. Holden nodded toward Winters. That snake's been trying to buy up half the county. Offered me 3 times market value for my South Ridge last month. But you didn't sell. My daddy worked that land. His daddy before him. Holden took a swig of beer. Some things matter more than money. From across the room, Winters had noticed their conversation. He excused himself from his associates and approached their table. Mr. Sullivan, he said smoothly, I see you're making friends. Wonderful community here, isn't it? So, supportive. The threat behind the words was unmistakable. Mr. Winters, Jack replied, not standing. I was just telling Jim here about your midnight fence inspections. Holden's eyebrows rose. That's so. Winters' smile tightened. I have no idea what you're talking about. 3 nights ago, Jack continued, 2 men cut my east pasture fence. One of them had an interesting message from you. A vein pulsed in Winters' temple. Careful with accusations, Sullivan. They have consequences. So do threats, Jack replied. He gestured to the room around them. These people have lived here for generations. They know what companies like yours do to communities. How much did you offer Reed to set up those women, to create debt they couldn't pay, so you could swoop in for the copper rights? The bar had gone silent, all eyes on their confrontation. Winters leaned in, voice low. You're in over your head, Marine. This isn't some battlefield where brute force wins. This is business. You're right about one thing, Jack replied, standing to face Winters directly. It's not a battlefield. On a battlefield, I'd respect my enemy. Winters' face flushed with anger. 1 week, Sullivan. Then we foreclose. As Winters stormed out, Holden chuckled. Well, son, you just made an enemy, but maybe a few friends too. Jack looked around to see several locals raising their glasses in silent acknowledgement. By morning, word of the confrontation had spread. The local feed store owner quietly informed them he'd deliver supplies after hours. A neighboring rancher offered use of his bull for breeding, saving them a substantial fee. Jack's loan application with the Veterans Program in Billings was moving forward, but time was running short. The bank payment deadline loomed just 10 days away. "We need a backup plan," Jack told the group as they gathered around the kitchen table. "The loan might not come through in time." "I've been thinking about that," Laura said, opening her laptop. "What if we approach this from a different angle? The copper deposit Winters wants. What if we use it as leverage?" "How?" Rebecca asked. "Conservation easement," Laura explained. "We sell development rights to a conservation group, protecting the watershed. Montana Western can't mine, but we retain ownership and agricultural use." "Would a conservation group move that quickly?" Sarah wondered. "They might if they knew what was at stake," Jack said, an idea forming. "And I know someone who might help." That evening, Jack called an old friend from his unit, Mike Brennan, now working for a veterans advocacy group with connections to environmental organizations. "Sounds like you landed in a war zone after all," Mike said after Jack explained the situation. "Something like that," Jack admitted. "But I'm not looking for a rescue, just information. Would a conservation group be interested in this property? And could they move fast enough?" "Let me make some call," Mike promised. 3 days later, a representative from Western Watersheds Alliance arrived at the ranch, a no-nonsense woman named Catherine Reynolds. "The copper deposit extends beyond your property," she explained after surveying the land. "If Montana Western establishes mining operations here, they could expand throughout the valley. Our preliminary tests show the watershed feeds an endangered cutthroat trout habitat downstream." "So you're interested?" Laura pressed. "Very," Catherine confirmed. "We can offer $200,000 for development rights. Not enough to clear all your debt, but combined with your veterans loan application, it might be enough," Jack finished. The bank payment deadline arrived with brutal finality. First Western Bank had formally denied their request for an extension, clearly under Montana Western's influence. Jack's loan from the Veterans Program had been approved, but the funds wouldn't arrive for another week. The conservation easement agreement was still being drafted. They were out of time. As if sensing victory, Harold Winters arrived personally that morning, accompanied by a bank representative and 2 sheriff's deputies. "Time's up. Sullivan?" Winters announced, barely containing his triumph. "First Western is calling and the loan effective immediately." Jack stood on the porch, Rebecca, Sarah, and Laura flanking him. "We have until midnight," Jack replied calmly. "A formality," the bank representative interjected. "We're here to begin inventory of assets for liquidation." "You're trespassing on private property," Jack said, "and we're not in default yet." One of the deputies shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Winters assured us the paperwork was in order." "Did he also tell you about his company's illegal tactics?" Jack challenged. "The fence cutting? The threats? The attempted arson last week?" The deputy looked to Winters, who maintained his composure. "Ridiculous allegations. We're here legally to protect the bank's interests." "Actually," came a new voice from behind them, "you're interfering with a federal investigation." Mike Brennan approached from a just-arrived SUV, flanked by 2 men in suits. "Mike Brennan, Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General," he introduced himself, showing credentials. "These gentlemen are from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We've been investigating a pattern of predatory acquisition practices targeting veterans' properties across 3 states. Jack managed to hide his surprise. This wasn't what he and Mike had discussed. "This is absurd," Winters sputtered. "You have no jurisdiction." "Mr. Sullivan purchased this property using VA benefits," Mike continued smoothly. "That puts it squarely in our jurisdiction. And given the evidence of coordinated financial pressure and intimidation tactics, the FBI has interest as well." One of the FBI agents stepped forward. "Mr. Winters, we'd like you to accompany us for questioning regarding your relationship with Franklin Reed and several other property transactions." The color drained from Winters' face. "This is a mistake. I have nothing to hide." "Then you won't mind clearing it up," the agent replied. "Now." As Winters was escorted to the federal agent's vehicle, the bank representative and deputies retreated hastily, promising to review the situation. When they were alone, Jack turned to Mike with a raised eyebrow. "VA benefits? FBI investigation?" Mike grinned. "The VA part is technically true. You used your GI Bill for that business degree that helped you open your shop, which you sold to buy this place. The rest, let's just say we put things in motion, and Winters will be tied up in questioning long enough for your loan to come through." "You could get in trouble," Jack said. Mike shrugged. "Worth it. Besides, Catherine from the Watershed Alliance called me. Their board approved the easement purchase, $200,000. Funds wired tomorrow. Combined with your veteran's loan next week, you'll clear the bank debt with room to spare." Jack looked at his old friend, a tide of emotion rising in his throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll hire some more vets to work this place," Mike replied. "I know at least 3 guys from our unit who could use a fresh start." 6 months later, Jack stood on the ridge overlooking the ranch, watching the evening light gild the mountains. Below, the operation hummed with activity. New fencing enclosed expanded pastures. Solar panels glinted on the barn roof. A small cabin near the creek housed 2 veterans from his old unit who had joined the operation. The partnership had evolved into something none of them had anticipated. Jack maintained equipment and security while developing a program for veterans to learn agricultural skills. Rebecca managed land and infrastructure, Sarah handled livestock, and Laura oversaw finances. They were not yet profitable, but they were stable. The debts were being steadily reduced, and their reputation for quality products was growing in regional markets. Montana Western Mining had withdrawn from the area entirely after the federal investigation expanded to include several of their board members. "Penny for your thoughts," Rebecca said, joining him on the ridge. "Just taking inventory," Jack replied, "seeing what's changed." "Including you," she observed. Jack nodded, unable to deny it. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. The anger that had driven him to seek isolation had given way to something else. Not peace exactly, but purpose. "When you drove up that day, I thought you were going to be another Franklin Reed," Rebecca admitted. "All talk and no substance. And now? Now I think Marie would be proud of what you built here." Jack looked at her sharply. He rarely spoke of his late wife, but the women had pieced together his story over time. "It's not what I planned," he said after a moment, "but maybe it's what I needed." Back at the house, Jack entered the small office they'd created for him. On the desk sat the photograph of Marie, now accompanied by a new picture. Jack with the entire ranch team, taken on the day they'd paid off the bank loan. He placed his hand on both photographs, past and present, side by side. The mountains stood silently against the evening sky, witness to yet another beginning in their ancient shadows. For Jack Sullivan, the journey that had started in loss had led him here, not to an ending, but to a new mission. One day at a time, one season at a time, healing the land as it healed him. What had begun as a covenant he never asked for had become a commitment he would not abandon. In seeking a place to escape the world, he had found instead a place worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and second chances, click the video on your screen now to watch another tale about veterans finding purpose in unexpected places. Don't forget to subscribe and support the channel so we can continue bringing you these stories of American grit and determination. Until next time, this is Frontier Tales, where the spirit of the West lives on. Outro for narrator. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of today's story. I hope Jack's journey from isolation to community resonated with some of you out there. You know, I've met plenty of veterans like Jack in my time, men who served their country with honor and then struggled to find their place back in civilian life. If you're a veteran listening to this, I want you to know that your skills, your discipline, your ability to adapt and overcome, these are invaluable, even if it doesn't always feel that way. And sometimes healing comes not from being alone with our thoughts, but from finding a new mission worth fighting for. For those of you who enjoyed this tale, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories. Your support means everything. Each like, comment, and share helps other folks find these stories too. Got a suggestion for a future story? Maybe you have a family tale of grit and determination you'd like to share? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next Friday, this is Thomas Reynolds for Frontier Tales, reminding you that the American spirit is alive and well in our history, in our communities, and in each one of us. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.